It was July 1942. The night was thick with smoke and the distant sounds of explosions echoed through the air. A group of women dressed in worn military fatigues moved through the shadowed landscape. Their mission was clear: sabotage the enemy's supply line, create chaos, and slow their advance. Yet as the minutes ticked by, their hope dimmed. The mission was failing, and they could feel it in their bones. Among them was Eliza Carter, a lieutenant whose sharp eyes had always led her through countless battles. She had never seen a mission go wrong, but tonight, it was different. Her team had been spotted. They were retreating now, weaving through thick forests, hearts pounding, desperately trying to evade capture. But the enemy was relentless, closing in like wolves on their prey. The last words of her commander, before he was struck down, echoed in her mind. "Stay alive. Get back to base. Don't let them take you," but it was too late. The screech of metal on metal, the sound of soldiers shouting orders soon overwhelmed them. One by one, the women were caught. Eliza's heart skipped a beat as she saw her fellow soldiers fall to the ground, bullets tearing through their bodies. A cold dread filled her, but there was no time to mourn. Her own body was dragged forward, her hands bound tightly behind her back. The scene was chaotic. Women were shoved into the back of trucks, their eyes wide with terror, their faces smeared with dirt and blood. Eliza could hardly comprehend what was happening. Was this the end? Was this how it all ended? Days passed in a blur of captivity. They were transported across enemy lines to a secret prison camp, the location a well-guarded secret. The women, stripped of their military ranks, were treated as mere trophies of war. The brutality they faced was unimaginable. Long hours of forced labor, beatings, and hunger. The days stretched on like an endless nightmare, and hope slowly faded from their hearts. But there was something even more unsettling about their situation. They weren't just prisoners. They were being watched. Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that someone, one of the captors, was always observing them, studying them with a peculiar intensity. He never spoke much, but his presence loomed large. His eyes never left the women, especially Eliza. There was something unnerving in his gaze, something that felt personal. And then, on a day that began like any other, something strange happened. The women were lined up in front of a dilapidated building, their faces downcast, their bodies weak from exhaustion. The captors handed each woman a small weathered mirror, one that looked out of place amidst the stark cold environment. It was nothing special, a simple hand mirror, the glass cracked and chipped. Yet when each woman held it up to her face for the first time in years, their reactions were nothing short of shocking. Some of the women gasped, others dropped to their knees, their faces covered in tears. Eliza stood frozen, unable to look at her reflection. The image of her once vibrant self, now a faded memory. She could barely recognize the woman in the mirror, the hollow eyes, the gaunt face, the pale skin that had once glowed with life. Her heart pounded as she realized the truth. They had changed. The war, the captivity, the loss, it had taken everything from them. But it wasn't just the shock of seeing themselves that was unsettling. It was the emotion that flooded through them all at once: grief, fear, hopelessness. It was as if the mirrors had opened a door to their past, to the lives they had once known but could never return to. They were no longer soldiers. They were prisoners. And the war, it seemed, had taken far more than just their freedom. The captors observed in silence, their faces unreadable. Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that they were waiting for something. But what? She had no answers, only questions. And as the days passed, another question lingered in her mind. Why had they been given the mirrors? April 1960. The dusty, sun-drenched room in the War Memorial Archives was filled with the sound of turning pages, the creak of the old wooden floorboards beneath weary feet. An air of melancholy hung in the space, as though the weight of history had settled into every corner. Pauline, an investigator with the War Veterans Association, sifted through endless records, photographs, and letters. She had been searching for years, ever since the sudden disappearance of her older sister Eliza Carter during the war. But it was only now, with the passing of so many years, that she had found the courage to dive deeper into the mystery. Her search had led her here, to this forgotten room, where the stories of the fallen were kept, preserved in time. There were whispers of lost soldiers, of women whose fates had never been written down. Yet among the stacks of official documents, something caught her eye. A faded envelope worn and brittle with age. It was addressed to Eliza, postmarked from an unknown location. The handwriting was familiar. It was hers. Pauline's hands trembled as she carefully opened the envelope, as if afraid of disturbing the fragile memory contained within. Inside was a letter, a journal entry written by Eliza herself detailing the harrowing days in the POW camp. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she read the first few lines. It's been weeks since we were captured, and the days blur into one another. The others are losing hope, but I'm holding on. I will survive this, I have to. For them, for the ones we lost. I don't know where we are, but I do know this. Our captors are watching us, waiting for something. But I don't know what. The words felt like a dagger to her heart. Eliza's writing was a lifeline, a glimpse into the soul of a woman she thought she had lost forever. Pauline's eyes raced ahead, searching for answers. The letter continued. Today they gave us mirrors. At first I didn't understand why. But when I saw myself, I saw someone I didn't recognize. I saw a stranger. The others too. We all reacted the same way. Some cried, some screamed, others just stared. It was as though we were seeing the years, the war, the isolation reflected back at us. And I couldn't help but wonder, what have we become? And what have they done to us? There was more, much more, detailing the harshness of their daily lives, their attempts to stay strong, to hold on to the hope of rescue. But it was the last paragraph that grabbed Pauline's attention. There is a man here, one of the captors, who watches us closely. I can't shake the feeling that he's waiting for something. But I don't know what. I feel like he's studying us, almost like a scientist with a specimen. Sometimes I catch him staring at me, and I wonder if he knows I'm the one keeping this journal. I wonder if he knows I'm planning to escape. The letter ended abruptly with no further explanation, no mention of the escape. No indication of what had happened after that fateful day. Pauline could feel the tension in her chest rise. What had happened to Eliza after the mirrors? Had she made it out alive? Or had the final pages of her story never been written? But there was a clue, an important one. The mention of the man who had been watching them. The captor with the strange, unsettling interest in Eliza. Pauline felt a chill run down her spine. What was the connection between him and her sister's disappearance? The letter had no answers, but it opened the door to more questions. As the years had passed, no one had ever found Eliza's body, and no trace of her or her fellow POWs had ever surfaced. They had vanished from the face of the earth. The military had long since given up on the case, but Pauline knew deep in her heart that her sister's story wasn't over. She had to know what had happened to them, to Eliza, and she wasn't going to stop until she found out. With the letter in hand, Pauline left the archive, her mind racing. She knew where she needed to go next, the village near the camp, a place she had never been able to visit until now. The place where Eliza had been last seen. But there was something else, something even more pressing. As she was about to leave, a stack of documents caught her eye. A faded, dusty file labeled "The Lost Female Prisoners." Without thinking, Pauline grabbed it. She didn't know why, but something told her this file would hold the key to everything. July 1989. The sun was setting over the small village near the ruins of the old POW camp. A warm golden light cast long shadows over the abandoned buildings, some of which had stood untouched since the war ended. Pauline stood at the edge of the field, staring at the decaying remnants of the camp, a place that had haunted her family's history for decades. The weight of time pressed down on her chest. But she had come here to uncover the truth, no matter how long it took. In her hand was the file she had discovered in the archives earlier that year, The Lost Female Prisoners. It was an old military dossier filled with names, dates, and photographs. Most of the women listed were never found, and the official records had long since closed the case. But there was one name that stood out to Pauline, Eliza Carter. Her sister's name was written in black ink, followed by a series of cryptic annotations that made her heart race. The file indicated that Eliza and the other women had been transferred to a different location, one that was never disclosed. Pauline had seen no mention of them in any other documents, as if they had been erased from history. Yet despite the military's attempts to bury the past, clues pointed to one haunting truth. Someone knew what had happened to them. As she turned the pages of the file, her eyes landed on a photograph, a group of women standing in front of a dilapidated building. The image was faded, the faces blurred by time, but there was something about the posture of one woman that caught her attention. The way she held her head, the determined look in her eyes, it was unmistakable. It was Eliza. The photo had been taken on the day they were given the mirrors. Pauline had seen the look in Eliza's eyes before, in her own memory. It was the same look she had carried in the few photographs her family had of her before the war. But there was something else in her sister's eyes now, a sense of loss, a shadow that hadn't been there before. And Pauline could feel it deep in her gut. Eliza had seen something in those mirrors that changed everything. A voice broke her thoughts. "You found it, didn't you?" It was a soft, tired voice, the voice of an old woman who had lived with the memories of the war far too long. Pauline turned to see an elderly woman standing behind her, leaning on a walking cane. Her face was lined with age, but there was a spark of recognition in her eyes. "I knew it would be you," the woman said, a faint smile on her lips. "You look just like her." Pauline swallowed the lump in her throat. "You knew my sister?" The woman nodded, her eyes distant. "We were in the same camp. We were all there, together. Eliza, she was one of the strongest among us. But that day, when they gave us the mirrors..." Her voice trailed off as if the memory was too painful to continue. "What happened?" Pauline asked, stepping closer. The woman's eyes flickered toward the ruins in the distance. "It was as if they wanted us to see who we had become, to strip away the last vestiges of hope of who we were before the war. Eliza, she couldn't take it. She looked at herself, and for the first time in months she saw everything she had lost. We all did, but for her it was different. She couldn't recover from it." Pauline felt a wave of sorrow wash over her. She had known Eliza was strong, but this, to be so broken by what was reflected back at you. But Eliza never gave up. She kept writing, kept fighting to survive. The woman continued, her voice growing steadier. "We all tried to escape, but something kept us there, kept us from breaking free. And that man, the one who always watched you all, he had something to do with it. He wasn't like the others. He knew too much about us, about you." Pauline's breath caught. The captor, the man who had watched Eliza so closely. "What do you mean? What did he know?" The elderly woman hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the horizon as though she was trying to remember something long buried. "He knew your sister wasn't just a soldier. She was someone he had once known, before the war. But when he saw her again, he saw something else. I don't know what it was, but it was enough to make him stay. To keep her alive when he could have easily let her die." Pauline was silent, trying to process the revelation. The mystery of the vanished soldiers was more than just the war. It was more than just a story of captivity and suffering. There was a deeper connection between Eliza and this captor, something that had haunted her sister, something that had never been shared. "Why did you never tell me this?" Pauline's voice cracked, her heart aching for all the years lost. The woman's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on Pauline's shoulder. "We were afraid, dear. Afraid of what they might do if we spoke. And when the war ended, no one asked about us. No one cared. We were forgotten. But you found the truth. You found her story." Pauline closed the file, the weight of the past pressing down on her. The answers she had sought for so long were beginning to unravel, but the truth was still elusive. What had Eliza known? What had she learned about the man who had watched her so intently? There was one last thing Pauline had to do. She turned to the elderly woman, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you know where he is now? The captor? The man?" The woman hesitated, her face a mask of sorrow. "I don't know. But there's a place he used to visit after the war, a place where no one dared go. If you want the final piece of the story, that's where you'll find it." The evening air grew still as Pauline looked toward the fading ruins. The final piece of the puzzle was waiting for her, but what would she find when she uncovered it?